Coming up on this edition of Rev Culture, exciting new developments. Thanks for joining me on this edition of Rev Culture. I'm Todd Lewis. Ahead on the program, Dr. Beth McQuiston from Abbott tells us of a new blood test that helps diagnose concussions and gives us some head health tips. But first up, Scalar Performance is a Canadian company that is developing EV technology in a variety of areas, including the SCR1 race car. Brian Bourne is one of the co-founders and tells us of how this company came of age. Brian, take me back to how this project of an electric race car started.
So how this started was my business partner and myself. We've done a fair bit of endurance racing, and we're big fans of that. But as you might imagine, with any kind of club level racing, you do spend a lot of time wrenching. And one year we went through a particular large number of motors. And that combined with, we were looking for an opportunity to work together and start a business. Like, hey, what if we were to take the great performance aspects of electric and the whole zero maintenance thing and put it into a race car, right? Without the downsides of a lot of the EVs, right? EVs are generally rightfully blamed for being boring and soulless, and largely, I mean, that's largely due to the fact that they're so teched up and have so much automatic driver assist, not because people don't like motors with lots of torque and horsepower. And so we set out to build something that a purist would like. And we used actually the Porsche GT4 as the primary inspiration car. And the result is a car that is the same overall weight, the same corner balance, but electrically powered. So we're pretty happy with where we've got to so far.
Did you imagine at some point building a fleet of these cars and racing your own series?
That was actually the dream going in the business case for putting the amount of effort we did into the development. Because there's nothing in the car that's out of a street going car. There's nothing been repurposed out of a Tesla or whatever other electric vehicle. So there was a heavy engineering effort, and the plan was to build a company along the lines of, Radical Sports Car, Revolution, or like any of the people who build a Janetta, like a purpose-built turnkey race car for the gentleman driver. That was really the goal. We were like, this will be the lowest total cost of ownership car because you won't be working on the motor all the time, and it'll be fun to race. And so we went to the NASA Super Touring Series, which is where you can race a car now, and they were super supportive. But as we got to where we've got to now, we realized just how much more money it was going to take to build a really polished product that we could just hand to anybody who didn't need any technical knowledge to run it. And what ended up happening during that period is people started to notice that, hey, you guys have like the only thing that's electric that's running 30 minutes. How have you managed all the thermal problems, like in demanding environment, blah, blah, blah. And so that pivoted to really a professional services business where we're consulting now on how to do those things. So, the thing that's on our YouTube is an F-250 build for a mining company, harsh environment. It's largely the race car powertrain, but in a heavy duty truck, which makes it actually a really fast truck. But things like thermal management are things that are way harder on the track, and almost everything's easier than the track. So we're starting to do more projects with companies that want to electrify a product line, which is actually really interesting.
I want to talk more about that in a second. Tell me some of the challenges that you ran into with your electric vehicle and trying to compete against combustion cars.
So there's two things that we learned, I'd say, that were not obvious to us going in. One is, once we got a car that could set a lap time like a GT4, and actually it's a little bit faster, we're like, okay, well, they should be wheel to wheel, and they never are. They totally leapfrog throughout the course of a lap, even if the actual final lap time is the same, just because the power delivery is so different. Instead of shifting to constantly stay in a small power range, The electric, while there's instant torque, horsepower is a function of torque times RPM. So the horsepower you have on tap is in a single speed gearbox is directly related to your speed. So the faster parts of the track, you have way more horsepower on tap than the car you're racing against. And on the slower part of the track, you have way less horsepower. And so it creates an interesting leapfrog that was, it's actually turned to be fun to watch, but it's like it just wasn't intuitive to us when we started. And two, we had people at the start telling us, "Oh, you'll be able to like air cool your batteries. Like we built a 1,000 horsepower thing, and don't worry about battery cooling." The battery cooling was by far the biggest challenge in the project. Of all the challenges, that wouldn't have been the one that probably jumped out the most, because people are like, "Oh, you only need battery cooling when you're charging." Like people are not full discharge of the battery between the corners and full charge of the battery into the corners, right back to full discharge out of the corner, back to full charge into the next corner. And so moving that kind of current moves some heat.
Clearly, that would be the case. The other interesting one that occurs to me is, what about the sound? All your competitors wouldn't be able to hear you sneaking up on them.
Yeah, I mean, you've had the benefit of hearing the car. It's not quiet. Like you hear it actually quite well when it's not drowned out by a ton of exhaust or
Right.
other race car sounds. So we put straight cut gears in it so it's not quiet. To the driver, actually, it's almost hearing protection loud in the car. Um, but yeah, outside you could definitely sneak up a little bit. Having said that, having done a lot of wheel to wheel myself, there's generally in the middle of a race, there's so many sounds going on. You're using your eyes more than your ears for people coming.
You mentioned that your company's not just about building race cars. Tell me about some of the other specific areas of work that Scalar Performance is in. You mentioned the truck for the mining company. What are some other areas you're pursuing?
So it's actually really interesting to me that almost every prospective customer we've talked to, or now turning to customers, they're all doing something different with electrification. We talked to one customer who's got a fleet of trucks that like barely travel at all, but they idle all day. So they're going through engines just with idle time, because the users of those vehicles, they're in law enforcement, um, end up just using climate control all day and not moving a whole lot. We talked to someone else who's doing undersea mining, which is it actually has a lot of the same kind of rapid recharge kind of issues that we face on a racetrack. And we've talked to somebody who's doing like military vehicles. Uh, there's some really interesting use cases where there's like some harsh environments, and they want to look to electric to either augment the combustion or replace, depending on the scenario. So I'm constantly surprised by all the different use cases, literally all the way up to like, we talked to somebody who builds big snow blowers that clear airport runways. They clear like 6 feet of snow at 60 kilometers an hour kind of thing. Like, like that's huge. That's a thing. um,
Some of these things are, I imagine, out of everyone's mind. Everyone's been so focused on EVs and getting them into people's driveways. These are the other areas that need a lot of research and development.
yeah, I mean, people ask me a lot about the EV marketplace, and I'm mostly like, it's not that I don't track it, but I mostly shrug my shoulders because, you know, um, I don't care. Like the consumer electric vehicle space, it's fun and interesting, and I actually believe they make a lot of sense. But um, pretty much everything in that space right now is in the same class as most of the combustion engines in the consumer space. Those cars also have too much ADAS to be fun, and so I, I just don't care. The high performance area um, is where we've been looking at. So whether we worked with a company called Hypercraft on a rock crawler that they built, um, and the guy who drives this thing, he's actually the founder of the King of Hammers series. And he's like, this truck goes places my normal combustion truck can't. Um, because think about instant torque. He's looking for like that 1 RPM kind of big wheel turn at a slow speed, and not, revving up the motor to try to get it into the power so it could turn that 40 something inch tire, right?
Right.
So we're mostly focused on like all these interesting use cases where electric is a real benefit, because of the performance characteristics.
It seems your company is a lot about solutions to current problems and maybe finding some unique areas that haven't been explored yet.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking at some very interesting things like hydrogen fuel cells for range extending. You know, we're I guess I should start with, my background's all tech, and so this I think actually in my partner's background's all building engines and race cars and drift cars. Actually, he's very active in the drifting community, and so um, neither one of us are coming at this from the sort of like, let's build safe and boring EVs to save the planet. We're like, man, these have some real performance characteristics that are untapped. And I love the technology, and he loves technology too, and building unique, like high performance, like things that other people kind of want to shy away from, is really what we want to embrace, is where we can apply new technology or technology to like existing problems in new ways. So I wouldn't say that we're inventing new things so much as applying them, like existing technology to existing problems in new ways, I think is what excites me.
And I guess your only limitation is your imagination and whatever problem someone brings to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like some of the problems people face, you're like, once you think here, you're like, oh, I guess that makes sense, but you've just never thought about it. So I love that too, right? Like, like, what happens when you set a couple grenades off underneath this powertrain? That's a really weird question. Nobody's asked that before. But in an armored personnel carrier, that matters.
Is any of what your development is highly classified? I don't want you to give away any state secrets, but is that another area?
That that's something that hopefully some of these projects will open the door to. We don't have anything highly classified right now.
The phrase I like for that is, when in doubt, check it out. And when in doubt, sit it out.
In sports, including motorsports, diagnosing a head injury and concussion can be challenging. Some symptoms are obvious, but it's not always easy to tell if a racer or athlete has suffered a concussion. Abbott Laboratories has recently gained approval for a blood test that can be used to diagnose concussions in as little as 15 minutes. Dr. Beth McQuiston is medical director for Abbott Diagnostics and is here to talk about this breakthrough. Tell me how this new test that Abbott Laboratories has developed works.
Well, this technology actually came out of a partnership from the United States Department of Defense and Abbott Laboratories in conjunction with a large-scale network called Track TBI. And what we have developed as a team is this blood draw. You do a blood draw from the arm. You take 2 or 3 drops of the blood and you put it on this cartridge. You take that cartridge, put it in this handheld portable device, and you wait 15 minutes. And in those 15 minutes, we're measuring 2 brain proteins down to the picogram level at the same time. And just to frame that, 1 picogram is the amount of weight of DNA in 1 hummingbird cell. So this test is phenomenal. And we've worked on it with over 300 of our scientists over the past 7 years. It's FDA cleared in the United States, and we'll be seeking clearance up in Canada as well. And what we're looking for is for these brain proteins to be low. And when these brain proteins are low, it means that you don't need a head CT.
In motorsports and other sports, sometimes we'll see athletes involved in contact or a collision in racing, and they're a bit woozy when they're walking around. That's an obvious symptom of a concussion or a head injury. Tell us some of the other obvious symptoms to look for and some of the not so obvious symptoms to look for.
I love this question. And I just want to share a study that we did at Abbott. We surveyed 1,000 adults, and what we found is the vast majority of people, 84%, did not know the most common signs and symptoms of concussion. They knew it was a problem, but they didn't know what the top 3 signs and symptoms are. So great question. The top things that you tend to see is, one, people just don't feel themselves. So that's kind of vague, but that's really important if you're feeling different from baseline. The others that you can see frequently would be headache. You can get a headache either right away, or you can get it later or the next week. The other things that are very, very common would include things like nausea. Sometimes you'll see vomiting. You'll have sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound. Sleep can be disrupted. You can have a change in temperament. You might be more irritable than you normally are. Your reaction time can be off. So there are a lot of different signs and symptoms of concussion. And if you want more information on that, you can go to www.concussionawarenessnow.org, or a more fun one to remember, checkyourmelon.com. And it lists out the most common signs and symptoms of concussion. Another one sometimes that people have is they may have amnesia, but that's not the most common one, but it does make it difficult when you're assessing someone, right? I used to work clinically, people would come into the emergency department and you're literally asking them, do you remember if you forgot anything? Which obviously is not the greatest question. So having an objective blood test is just a huge leap forward.
If we believe someone has suffered a head injury, what's the correct protocol with how to deal with the situation? I mean, even before you have EMTs or other medical personnel on site.
Well, the phrase I like for that is, when in doubt, check it out. And when in doubt, sit it out. So if there's any question at all, it's really important to pull that person for many reasons. One, you want to make sure that they're safe. Two, you need to see if they need emergency medical attention. There are some things that really lend you to saying, hey, you really need to go on right now. That would be any loss of consciousness. They're having any kind of amnesia or just very confused, vomiting, a severe headache. You have to go in to be checked. And the reason for that is you want to evaluate that patient and see if they have any bleeding in their brain. That would be considered an emergency.
The new test that Abbott's come up with is for hospital staff to administer. I'm wondering if at some point it might be available to first aid or medical personnel that are on site for events. That would speed things up even further.
Another great question, Todd. So right now, the first wave that we have available in Canada is our plasma test, and we go to the hospital to have that checked out. We just recently got the whole blood test cleared in the United States, and we're seeking that as well in Canada. And what that is it's a venous straw, and you put 2 drops of that blood on a cartridge and you wait 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, this little cartridge on this tiny device can let you know if you have brain proteins in your peripheral blood. And again, you're looking at a low number is what you want. So we are working towards that. And this journey is one of many steps.
The larger touring series have great medical facilities with them, but for local community tracks, if this is more accessible, then I think you're more likely to find more people that might need further attention, because those are the ones that'll say, yeah, I'm fine, everything's fine, I can get going again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We totally agree with you. And right now we have our iStat device. It actually is in medical tents in the United States. For example, the World Marathon Majors, and exactly to what you're saying. You want it to be right there. It would still be administered by a healthcare practitioner, but it does bring the lab to you. So we are working towards that. And that's one of our goals.
Motorsports has come such a long way over the last 20 or so years, whether it's safety in the cars, the helmets, the tracks themselves. Are there any areas that you can think of or recommend that maybe should have a little more attention and focus in terms of safety and prevention?
So safety equipment is so important. The best injury is no injury, of course. So prevention is key. And some things that you can do to maximize your chance of success and minimize your chance of injury, always making sure you get a good night's sleep. If someone misses a night of sleep, their performance and their reaction time can be that of someone who has a blood alcohol of 0.08. So making sure you are well rested. If you have an event, get there in advance and adjust to the local time zone. Get your body clock working for you, for the training and for the event. That's extremely important. So number 1, getting enough sleep. Number 2, staying hydrated, making sure you're not getting dehydrated, and again, slowing your reaction time and your performance. Number 3, making sure that you've eaten something and your blood sugar isn't going to go low. There are some really well done studies that show that when people are dehydrated, when people are tired, when people have a low blood sugar, their performance is off. And when you guys are going as fast as you are, that reaction time is critical, and you do not have time to be messing that up. So all of those things. And then, of course, wearing the helmets. You guys are the cool kids, right? So you can lead by example for the rest of the world and make sure that people are, indeed, children, parents are wearing their helmets when they go for a bike ride, and also when they're on these e-scooters. We're seeing a huge uptick in concussions and other injuries from these e-scooters. When you get on an e-scooter, wear your helmet, and you guys can set the example for that.
We're learning more about diagnosing, and this new test is great. What are some of the areas that you may look at or might be explored further in terms of treatments for concussion? Because there's still so much that we need to know.
Yes, I completely agree with you once again, Todd. I'm a neurologist, and I'm also a dietitian. So one of the areas that I think is so compelling, so interesting, is nutrition's impact on the brain. And now that we have these objective tests to monitor the brain and how it's doing objectively, right? Not just how are you doing? Do you remember if you forgot anything? That lends itself to some really important trials, including pharma trials, including nutrition trials, including prevention of injury, different helmet types. All of these sorts of things are now going to be really getting a nice boost, and a turbo boost if you want.
I have one more question. You might think it's a little odd, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There's so much focus on protection for head injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Is there anything that we can do to train our head, train our brain, and everything surrounding it to be stronger and reduce the possibility of injury, the way we develop other muscles?
Absolutely. That's another area of active research, and there are many things you can do. So particularly for women, for example, we tend to have a more thin neck. Our neck musculature is less. But if that's the case, there are things you can do for neck strengthening exercises, which would be important. Also, you really are what you eat. Your brain is made up of the compounds that you're eating. So having a healthy diet, maximizing and optimizing things like vitamin D, for example, very important. Eating a nice healthy diet with organic berries and salmon. These are things to help preload so you have your own internal airbags, if you will. And then also sleep. Sleep is so protective of your brain. Outside of that, exercise. And by exercise, I don't mean you have to run a triathlon. I just mean go for a walk every day. That is really good for your brain. Get up, get moving, do whatever you love. If you like walking, great. If you like hiking, fantastic. If yoga is your thing, wonderful. Pick something that you love and do it every day for at least 15 minutes to 30 minutes. There's also another thing you can do, which is weightlifting. We know that lifting weights decreases insulin sensitivity. It helps ward off things like diabetes and so forth. So lifting weights is also something you can do.
And that will do it for this edition of Rev Culture. Don't forget you can catch up on past episodes by going to the Rev TV YouTube channel. That's also where you will find episodes of Speed Chronicles every week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.